Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel Why Not Daily Spoiler. Dominic's railing point leaves Victor reeling.
When Dominic reaches his breaking point, Victor's plan fails. Months previously, Dominic's arrival was uncertain. DNA proved a biological connection to Victor's family. But for Dominic, the finding has always been more about identity than money. He didn't look for advantage, but for solutions. Victor's initial response was a mix of cold denial and calculated planning. As a patriarch, Victor considers all factors, including potential legal repercussions, shareholder perception, and family history. Dominic, on the other hand, cautiously tested the waters by holding private meetings with Victoria, Nikki, and Victor, including an awkward conversation. Dominic discovers that he was listed in a ledger long before he was invited to the table after learning more via old letters, a faded photo, and a hospital slip. He was kept out by someone. That information is like a stone in his stomach. The strategy is unveiled. Time is not wasted by Victor's close group. He brings together a small war room consisting of a bored ally who has long been leery of succession drama, legal advice, and a sardonic public relations specialist. Victor's strategy involves manipulating the story, limiting Dominic's legal power by providing a sizable but highly restrictive settlement, obtaining a confidentiality agreement, and portraying Dominic in the public eye as a lost son seeking family, as opposed to a claimant. Among the practical actions are a private offer that includes a non-disparagement clause and a trust fund with stipulations, an unchangeable arbitration clause in a sealed mediation agreement, a discreet approach to important Newman trustees to make sure Dominic wouldn't have access to any mutual money, a PR embargo guaranteeing Dominic's compassionate inclusion upon the signing of the documents. Allies portray it as damage control, whereas Victor portrays it as mercy. The subtext is to maintain control. Dominic's attorney. The offer is made to Dominic, but he wants the truth, not a paper. He selects a young, practical lawyer who has a track record of prioritizing the needs of his clients. The lawyer demands openness, including the original DNA's chain of custody, access to pertinent hospital and trust records, and, above all, unrestricted discussions with Victor without NDAs. Dominic is not going to be held in quiet. Victor loses patience and attempts to convince him using charm and threats. But the more he tries, the more hostile Dominic gets. The arc establishes the scene, a patriarch who counts lines in his favor, until those lines unravel, and a guy who has been offered money that smells of containment. Cliffhanger. A whistleblower intercepts Victor's private email telling his legal team to speed up the settlement and forwards it to Dominic's attorney. Increasing tensions, private rage, public lights. Leak and response. After learning of Victor's coercive offer and the directive to close before he becomes a public problem, Dominic's attorney decides not to sign. The draft terms are leaked, not the private family discussion, but the conditional framework that views Dominic as a resource that needs to be kept under check. When the leak reaches the Genoa Gazette, there is an instant outcry. Social media feeds are cruel. In private, Victor rages, but in public, he makes a statement regarding family privacy. He had long thought that his fortune would allow him to purchase silence. But this is not the same as purchasing dignity. And the public outrage portrays the settlement as condescending and paternalistic. Dominic loses his sense of morality. He notices the offer for Victor's plan trap. When a man refuses to be choreographed, the public becomes sympathetic. The meeting of trustees. The trustees of Newman meet. While some are embarrassed by the appearance, others are realistic and fear the response of the market. Among them are activists who advocate for independent audits of family-related spending and governance improvements. Victor notices a weakness. Leverage changes as trustees begin to inquire. From the sidelines, Dominic observes silently. He understands that an institutional weakness has been revealed by his own presence. He is also aware of Victor's power, which includes a horde of supporters, legacy control, and board influence. However, Dominic declines the offer of a golden silence. Cliffhanger. An insider who can produce a sealed codicil, a document that might alter everything, is offered a limited meeting with Dominic by a trustee over the phone. The pivotal moment, individual boundaries. The codicil. An older member of Victor's household staff who confesses to having entrusted once with a sealed codicil that Victor wrote during a particularly paranoid year is the insider that Dominic meets with the trustee. If the codicil is genuine, it may suggest Victor meant to recognize or disinherit specific lines in specific circumstances. According to the insider, they were not allowed to make any announcements unless Dominic shown traction. Dominic asks the court for permission to open the codicil. In order to keep documents sealed, Victor attempts to apply for emergency protective orders while venting in secret. Teams of lawyers spar. Given the high-profile nature, the judge places Dominic's attorney under strict chain of custody and mandates limited disclosure. It is not the tidy confession Victor believed it to be when the document is read to Dominic and his lawyer in front of the camera. The legal terminology is not definitive, but rather a jumble of ambiguities. Victor had sent a letter to someone long ago, mentioning choices I made and things I wished could be different. The codicil appears to be a heart rather than a deed. Dominic feels irritated. He received nuance instead of the definitive proof he sought. However, the codicil's margin also has a Geneva clinic name and a hospital case number. That piece is essential. A will test. Dominic advances. He requests a neutral Swiss lab to retest his DNA. Victor requests that the test be administered in a lab he has faith in. Dominic declines, preferring impartiality that cannot be linked to Newman's influence. In terms of biological relationships, the neutral lab produces a result that is unmistakable, nearly definite of a paternal link. The crisis is not that. The community's understanding of fatherhood is at the center of the crisis. It concerns inheritance, his right to demand explanation, and whether or not biological kinship entitles one to a place at the table. Being a variable in other people's games is Dominic's breaking point, which is personal rather than legal. At a news briefing, he publicly states that he will not be purchased. The drama is adored by the media because the public perceives Victor as a man with a name who is unyielding. His public relations efforts fail. Cliffhanger. In a private outburst, Victor calls an urgent board meeting to strip Dominic of his authority and advance a covert vote that would assign a trustee of his choosing to oversee family trusts. The plan fails, public panic pride. The vote in secret backfires. If it works, Victor's strategy to avoid Dominic's leverage is procedural genius. By designating a trustee with the power to bind trust payouts, the vote would essentially eliminate Dominic's capacity to make any claims that went beyond what Victor permitted. However, there are some proxies and backdoor promises, so the meeting is rigged. The issue. Dominic's attorney shares with the SEC and a disgruntled trustee audio that was leaked from Victor's attorney asking for proxies. The recording exposes the intention to rig trustee votes, which is a clear indication of wrongdoing in governance. In soap logic, the SEC, or a state regulator, initiates an informal investigation. The hesitant trustees withdraw out of concern for possible regulatory exposure. In a rush of resignations, the vote is unsuccessful. Victor suffers a disastrous outcome as a result of his attempt to neutralize Dominic, which leaves him vulnerable to public disdain and regulatory risk. Dominic observes as his father's corporate command, the pillar of invulnerability, starts to falter. He still doesn't want to be defined by vengeance, so he needs to exercise caution. He seeks self-determination, restoration, and answers. He makes the decision to work harder for respect and truth rather than money. Damage to collateral. Victor makes additional errors as a result of his panic. He hires a fixer to create a whisper campaign that portrays Dominic as an opportunist who aimed to exploit DNA as a weapon for business benefit. The tabloids use the fixer's selectively leaked recording of Dominic's private chat, which is edited to emphasize an offhand comment about being taken care of, as evidence of his avarice. Dominic reaches a breaking point. He denounces the slur publicly before doing something Victor did not anticipate. He files an injunction to lift gag restrictions and force Victor to take a sworn deposition under oath, either in public or in a sealed court session that a judge could open if he suspects lying. Victor is taken aback that a man of control may falter during an oath-taking deposition. The idea frightens him. In order to avoid being cross-examined by his own son, he had intended to buy Dominic's silence. Cliffhanger. Dominic's attorney threatens to request a court order to force a deposition and for the judge to consider sanctions, while Victor's legal team encourages him to decline the deposition. Moral exposure and public deposition. The day of the deposition. The judge decides in Dominic's favor, requiring Victor to take a deposition before an impartial court reporter because the issue affects corporate governance and possible investor loss. The last thing Victor wants is for his lawyers to get ready. He is not used to cross-examination. He is used to monologues. It is an electric deposition. In an apparently straightforward but devastating moment, Dominic's lawyer asks, "Did you know about X? When did you find out about Y? Have you ever planned to conceal information?" The inquiries are surgical in nature. Once self-assured, Victor's answers falter. He reaches out and then pulls back. More details concerning Victor's years of concealment are revealed in the deposition, including a history of transactional family ties, manipulation techniques, and plans to conceal unpleasant facts. As his father's fabled armor reveals seams, Dominic looks on in agony. He is merely demanding the truth, and he is not pleased to see his father in such vulnerability. The complexity is tasted by the audience. Dominic's steadfastness is dignified, but public schadenfreude is repulsive. Cliffhanger. The transcript of the deposition is leaked. The media eats it up. Investors become alarmed. The value of Victor's stock declines. Dominic is charged by Victor's legal team with planning the leak and faces retaliation. The Dominic's breaking point, personal activities, moral fury. The individual boundary. Although Dominic has persevered through humiliations, the combination of containment tactics, public slander campaigns, and trustee manipulation attempts drives him over the edge. He addresses Victor in private, posing as a son seeking human responses rather than as a plaintiff. A living room that has seen generations of Newman victories. Victor in his favorite chair, like a lion on the prowl. Dominic lean, tired, and dangerously calm. The meeting is a masterwork of soap suspense. "Why did you conceal the truth?" he says. According to Victor, the solution is pragmatic. To protect families, to manage legacy, and to maintain the company's viability. A life molded by omission is a betrayal to Dominic. Dominic's breaking point is ultimate repudiation rather than violence. He says he would compete for a newly established seat as a public monitor of Newman Trusts and Philanthropy, rejects the settlement offers, and demands public recognition. In a bold move that puts him at odds with Victor's old guard, he will serve as both a critic and a steward. This is the emotional high point. Dominic takes charge because he is sick of being controlled, not because he craves power. Cliffhanger. In order to obtain the trust funds that Victor suggested, Dominic submits paperwork to establish an independent foundation with a governance charter that expressly forbids Victor's unilateral power. Victor's plan failures, legal, consummate, and regulatory. Revolt of investors and reputation breakdown. Investors are now worried about three things: governance risk, Victor's deposition transcript; regulatory risk, the trustee leverage audio; and reputational risk, the smear leaks and Victor's war romantics. A powerful activist investor demands independent supervision of family-related transactions and calls for an urgent shareholder meeting. Citing fiduciary duty, a number of institutional investors openly support the measure. The appointment of the intended trustee has been canceled. Victor's network is made public. Independent audits of family philanthropy. Restrictions on unilateral family spending over a certain amount. And the creation of a compliance committee with Dominic as a non-voting member, a symbolic but impactful move, are among the reforms that the board votes for. Victor's strategy to silence Dominic falls apart, creating a system that gives power to others and undermines Victor's one-man rule. The price in human life. Victor suffers private setbacks in addition to public humiliation. He alienates former allies who believe their own positions are in jeopardy due to the publicity. In private, some younger family members support Dominic's moral stance. With sadness, Nikki observes Victor as the man she loved is humbled and his influence diminished. Despite all of his mistakes, Victor is not a caricature. Rather, he is flawed in ways that allow for complexity and future reconstruction. The charter of Dominic's foundation is made public. He declines corporate funding that would allow Victor to maintain his power. The gesture strengthens public support and further erodes Victor's authority. It is both tactically astute and morally right. This is Dominic's breaking point in its entirety. The instant he refuses to give up, refuses to be intimidated by money, and insists on being recognized according to his own standards. Cliffhanger. Victor gives the Newman board an ultimatum from within. He won't leave quietly. Already disturbed, the board weighs its options, which include putting Victor's authority on hold while a governance review is conducted. Resolution, reckoning, and the follow-up. Public reckonings and legal settlements. A negotiated middle ground emerges from several court battles. Victor consents to some governance reforms. Independent oversight limits the trustee's authority. And Dominic's legal claims for a larger inheritance are resolved with a trust designed especially to support Dominic's independent foundation and guarantee a board with community representatives. Victor is not ruined, but he also does not receive everything. Under the new supervisory regulations, the corporation stabilizes. Dominic is granted the freedom to create a legacy in public that is not influenced by the Newman myth. Victor agrees to private continuity in exchange for public limitations. So the settlement is more of a recalibration of power than a surrender. Individual, recovery, and prospects for the future. The last scenes are more subdued, yet still impactful. Dominic has his foundation's first meeting in a small hall with a few doubtful benefactors, city youngsters, and teachers. Victor attends, but he observes rather than commands. In the wings, a father and son have a private talk. Victor's armor prevents him from apologizing completely. Dominic responds, "And you are always more complicated." Instead, he says, "You are always more stubborn than I thought." The discussion is a kind of truce, not reconciliation, but a human détente. At the founding ceremony, Phyllis, who was angry while witnessing a lot of the intrigue, talks about dignity and truth. They've changed the Newmans. The business has new checks. Dominic has moral authority and a platform. A new order, where openness has a place at the table, replaces Victor's strategy to maintain the status quo and domesticate the presence of a new family member. The reason this arc functions. Character-driven stakes. This storyline is based on the emotional reality of a boy who wants to be known, but it reads like a courtroom thriller. Characters are forced to face systems of silence as a result of Dominic's breaking point, which is both civic and personal. Procedural realism plus soap emotion. The plot stays melodramatic and personal while adhering to believable business and legal systems, from trustee votes to neutral lab DNA. Moral ambiguity. Victor is more than just a villain. By his own reasoning, he is a protector. Yet that reasoning deprives other people of their free will. The arc calls for reckoning rather than simple moralising. Future fuel. The reorganized Newman family, Dominic's foundation, and the governance changes produce long-term storylines that include opportunities for redemption, retaliation, political scheming, and in-depth examinations of legacy. What may occur next? After being publicly reprimanded, Victor covertly finances policy think tanks and launches a PR effort for moral rehabilitation that combines power and repentance. Who is he going to hire? Corporate interests versus Dominic's foundation. Will Dominic remain morally upright as his foundation expands and corporate players attempt to sway grants? An older codicil resurfaces. It appears that Victor once anticipated a different succession, a judicial war for the morale of his successors. Romantic aftershocks. Under a well-known last name, Dominic develops a new relationship that puts his public persona and intimate love to the test. A darker thread. A fixer who used to work for Victor's camp makes reference to a more sinister secret about Victor's history. Will it be used to complete what Dominic started?